It's been many years since this happened, and now enough time has passed for me to get to a place where I can feel comfortable enough to share my experiences. I hope that maybe they can help someone, somehow. It all started when a co-worker I was good friends with came over to me at work and said that the manager of the building I lived in at the time was on the phone. I spoke with the manager of the building, and he told me that there was a woman at my home who claimed to be my mother, and she was asking him for the key to my apartment. He called me to make sure I was okay with giving her the spare key. Something was off. I knew that my mum would call ahead before visiting, for one, and secondly, she lived a plane flight away. There's no way that she would just randomly show up without at least sending me a message. The manager then said that my mum had told him, before he called, that she had come without telling me, and it was a sudden thing without a plan in place. She said she wasn't able to contact me before she set off, and she was sorry for the inconvenience. I told the manager that I wasn't sure. I mean, it seemed so strange and vague. And that's really unlike my mum. I said I would call my dad and try my mum just to make sure, and I would call him back in about 15 minutes max. The manager called back after about 5 minutes and said that the woman disappeared while he was on the phone to me. Now that creeped me out. I thought about that at work for the rest of my shift. Could it have been my mother? I guess there wasn't a 0% chance. No one picked up when I called home, but that wasn't unusual because my parents both had jobs, and it was the middle of the day when I called. I got back to my apartment later that night, and I gasped when I saw my door. The door had scratches in it. The door scope, you know, the peephole, that was cracked. It looked as if it had been hit by some kind of blunt object. I felt sick seeing that. The sheer determination someone had in their mind to get in. I was really scared and young. Instead of calling the police, I called my parents and confirmed that my mum hadn't come for a surprise visit. I was so overwhelmed by everything, I just left it as it was. I just wanted to put it all behind me. That would prove to be a mistake. I stayed with a friend for about a week. I would have stayed longer, but I knew I was being a burden, even if my friend wouldn't admit it. About a month went by, and one night I was woken up in the dead of night by a thunderous thudding sound. I sat bolt upright in bed and quickly realized that it was my door which was being blasted against. I heard the door rattling in its hinges. It was so terrifying. This time, I didn't hesitate. I called the police. I sobbed down the phone as quietly as I could, and they told me that someone would be arriving shortly. From the noises the person was making on the other side of the door, I could tell it was a male. The wait for the police was short, but agonizing. The police arrived in minutes and were able to restrain and arrest him. The man had tools for breaking and entering. I think if the police were any later, then he could have gotten in. He had a crowbar and lockpicks. When the police told me that, I couldn't help but shudder. One saving grace perhaps would be that the man got incredibly drunk beforehand to summon up the courage to try and break in, and this ultimately made him fail in his attempt. When asked why he was doing this, he provided a strange stream of excuses. He first said that his girlfriend lived there. Okay then, so why'd you need to break in? Then he said that he got the wrong apartment. He lived there, and he couldn't get in. The police said that he lived miles and miles away from my building, so there went that excuse too. He then finally said something that made me squirm. He said that he was paid to break in by a woman he didn't know very well. My mind went back a month to the manager calling my building with a woman pretending to be my mum, asking for the spare key. The police were in touch in the coming weeks and months, but they couldn't ever find the woman or what her purpose or goal was. I really have no idea either. Well, as you might expect, I moved out of there pretty quickly. I don't even live in the same city anymore. It took a very long time to get used to the idea of living alone again. And my experience has really affected me, but I won't let it become me or consume me. I can't help wonder some nights about that woman. Who that woman was and why she was so adamant on getting in. I think if she was successful, I wouldn't be here to share this story. I'd love to hear any theories. This happened during summer, when I was a high school student. I spent most of my time after school browsing the magazines in my local convenience store. In that store, they always had the magazines visible from the outside, so if you stand in front of the magazine rack, then you're visible to the street outside. So there I was reading my magazine, and then I saw a woman outside looking at me. I didn't think that was unusual since I always take a glance at the magazines whenever I pass by. What I did think was slightly strange was the fact that she was wearing a thick winter coat in the height of summer. But then again, some people get colder easier. She was really beautiful, so I didn't mind her standing there looking my way. I tried not to stare back though. I just thought, oh yeah, a babe is checking me out. Go me. I went back to the magazine for a while, and then I naturally glanced up, and my eyes fell on the woman in the red coat. Maybe it was just my imagination, but I thought to myself, oh, is she getting closer and closer? Well, maybe she's a little strange after all. I started to think, that thick coat is a little weirder than I first thought. She was still staring at me, so I went back to the magazine thinking to myself, I'm not going to look at her again. I didn't want to make eye contact. Plus, I didn't want to leave the store while she was out there, so I kept reading the magazine. I ended up reading the whole thing. After that, I couldn't bear it anymore. I looked up, and I couldn't see her. Oh, you must have gone somewhere, I thought. I looked around a little, and then I saw her. Suddenly, she was right in front of the glass. When she was right before me, I saw her eyes, and it struck terror into my soul. Her eyes were jet black. I was reminded of a child's drawing. You know when a kid draws something so thickly with crayons. Her coat was a brilliant red and her eyes were a nightmarish black. She stood there in front of me with no expression on her face. She stood there staring at me like a predator. The black eyes were locked into mine, and I felt my spine stiffen. But I didn't look away. I dropped the magazine I was holding. The sound of it hitting the ground brought me back to my senses. I looked away to pick it up, and when I looked back outside, she was gone. Since that day, I have heard rumors about the area by the convenience store. By the way, it's by a fountain in a public square in Osaka. Some people have mentioned seeing a woman with black eyes there too. Needless to say, I ran as fast as I could away from that store once I saw that she was gone. Sorry, it's not the scariest of experiences, but it's true, and I would love to know what the hell that was. This is a very popular urban legend from my town. Some say that even hearing this can cause something to happen. So I want you to keep an eye out and stay safe. I first heard this story when I was in the first year of junior high school, or primary school depending where you're from. My brother told me this, and he's just over 2 years older than me. I know this story is Go Away, Old Lady, but it might be called other names in other places. It goes like this. If you hear a knocking against your windows or your doors in the middle of the night and you think to yourself, who's out there? Just like normal, right? You either carelessly open it without thought or you don't open it at first and eye the door or window suspiciously because who would turn up at your home in the middle of the night? But then you hear the voice of a family member or a friend, and you think it's all fine, unaware that whatever that thing is behind the door has the ability to mimic voices. Once you open the door or the window and allow it access, it comes for you and takes your soul, leaving you an empty vessel, a hollow shell, unable to comprehend emotion or cognitive thought. So if you hear knocking later, try to ignore it. When I first heard this story, I was really creeped out by it. I didn't want to sleep alone, so I slept in my brother's room, on the fold-out bed. Quite a number of nights later, I was awoken in the middle of the night. I can't be certain of the exact time, but it was around 1 a.m. I heard a series of loud bangs against our front door. It was so loud, I was thinking, what the hell? But then, I suddenly remembered the story my brother told me. Oh God, it's here, I thought to myself. The reason why I knew it to be the front door was because we live on the 3rd floor. It's usually very quiet at night. You can often hear people walking through the hallway if there are people visiting anyone on our floor. I thought that it might just be a drunk out there or something, but I heard no voices. There were no footsteps at all. Also, we have a doorbell. Why wouldn't whoever was out there use it? My mind went back to my brother's story and I started to shiver in my bed. I felt tears begin to gather in the corners of my eyes. I cowered beneath the blankets for what felt like hours. I didn't dare pop my head out of the covers to check my alarm clock. I eventually went back to sleep somehow, and I woke up with a question in my mind I haven't been able to answer. Why didn't anyone else wake up when the door was being hammered on? No one even mentioned it the following day. I didn't have the courage to ask them. I don't know. Maybe there's some truth to urban legends. Apparently if you chant, "Go away, old lady," 3 times, it makes whatever is out there go away. I don't know why it's regarded as an old woman. Maybe hag is better, I guess. It might be named an old woman by whoever has seen it, or those who know more of the origins of this urban legend. But anyway, if you hear knocking later, don't answer it. This happened when I was in elementary school, a long time ago. Back in those days, there was this old train storehouse in my neighborhood. It was kind of like a depot, I guess. The train storehouse was close to being demolished, so prior to its destruction, it was abandoned. The exterior yard of the building was surrounded by barbed wire, and ever since a young age, I was told never to enter the grounds. But one day after school, one of my friends said that he had spotted a gap through the barbed wire fence, and he asked if I wanted to go and check it out with him. I wanted to, so later that day, we snuck in to see what was in there. It was incredibly big. It was a train depot after all. We walked the grounds in awe of the size of the place. Before too long, we came across a night watchman's room or something similar. In that room, we found a calendar, so we had a vague idea of when the place was shut down. It was pretty interesting. Next, we found a basement area. And down there, we found more interesting things. There were suites from years gone by, maybe even from the 60s. Yeah, it was a long time ago when I was young. I was really enjoying quietly walking around down there. But up until that moment, I believed that there was no one else there except me and my friend. I wasn't ready for what happened next. I realized that we weren't alone. There was a woman in the basement with us. She was wearing all white, and she was wearing a very strange mask. She really scared me. I think I might have yelped when I saw her. Her mask had feathers above it, I remember thinking that it looked like a peacock's feathers. The mask's pale white color looked like the moon at night. All you could see was her eyes. She stood there patiently in front of my friend and I, and she said in a quiet, yet almost kind voice, "I think you boys should go home as quickly as you can." We went home just as she told us to. We shuffled off in silence, frightened by what had just happened. I don't know if I was more frightened by the strange woman or the prospect that I could be in trouble with my parents or the school. On the way home, I was thinking about the incident. Surely we would have noticed someone coming down the stairs into the basement. Why the hell was there a woman in a mask in an abandoned building? She wasn't living there. She wasn't homeless. I didn't understand it, and when my friend and I arrived at that conclusion, it made the whole experience that much more creepier. My friend and I started running, and then crying. We never went back again. I think we shouldn't have been there, and I think we got away with one. Who knows what went on down there? This happened last summer. I woke one morning at around 4 or 5 a.m., and that's pretty rare for me. The sun was shining through my curtains. It was dawn. I decided to open the curtains and take in the morning. Like I said, it was pretty rare for me to be awake that early. When I looked at my sleepy town beneath the golden rays of the sun, I just thought, wow. Seeing the sun rising that morning was truly amazing. I stepped out onto the balcony and I watched. It was the first time I had seen the sun rise from my new apartment. I had only moved in during the previous year's autumn. I was fascinated, but I quickly noticed something. It was coming from the northwest. We all know that the sun generally rises from the east, so it really puzzled me. I didn't understand what the hell was going on. I looked around, and then I noticed that I wasn't alone. I saw a family out there on the balcony across the way, in the opposite building. They were waving their hands. Not in a beckoning way, but more of in a wait kind of gesture, thrusting their hands palm forward with their wrists bent upwards. The father in the family appeared to be saying something. I couldn't hear him. I couldn't hear anything. It was as if all the sound had been removed. Life was on mute. I was trying to make out what he was saying via lip reading, but I couldn't. My head was spinning. The sun, the family, no noise. What was going on? I lost consciousness, I guess, because the next thing I knew, I was waking up in a hospital bed. I learned that 6 days had passed since the morning I woke up and went out on the balcony. The most shocking news of all came. I had a fractured skull. The back of my head had been so badly misshapen. When I first felt it, I recoiled in horror. It doesn't feel like the shape of a normal human head anymore. According to my neighbor, I was lying on the floor of the balcony with a pool of blood emanating from the back of my head. I found out much later that based on the bloodstains, I must have been banging the back of my head on the exterior wall, out there on the balcony. It sounded like the only thing that stopped me was when my head split. But no, that doesn't seem right at all. How does anyone hit their own head that hard against the wall? What kind of movement would I need to do? I thought that I slipped or tripped or something, but when I went home, I saw the bloodstains on the wall, and they were head height. In the end, I have no idea what happened, and although my injuries healed and I wasn't fatally wounded, I still suffer from severe headaches, insomnia, and the occasional numbness, which feels like paralysis. This happened a few years ago, and recently a vague memory from that morning came back to me. After I saw the family doing their strange wait waving motion, I noticed something else and looked away. There was another person on the balcony with me. I don't know where she came from, but there was a girl there. She looked to be around 16 years old. She slowly reached her hand towards my face and started slamming my head against the wall. 9 times my head hit the wall. I remember it clearly. I remember hearing the fracture. I remember hitting the floor and feeling the blood wet the back of my neck and my t-shirt. But my memory is strange. How the hell would a teenage girl get on my balcony at like 5 a.m.? And she would need enough strength to overpower me and use enough force to fracture a skull. This memory seems just too impossible to be real. Also, the sun rising from the wrong direction, and that family doing the strange wait gesture, and when all the sound disappeared. That can't be true memories. I wonder if it was all a dream, and if I injured myself while I was sleeping somehow. Maybe due to the injuries I sustained, my brain created a weird memory in an attempt to help me rationalize the trauma. But there are bloodstains on the balcony. How did I get there? I have no idea what happened. No one knows what happened. I don't know. It's all really horrible. Did someone do this to me? Did someone do something to me and put me out there on the balcony? I have no idea.